first thing I did when the band got started is I called Ian Mackay because I figured he'd probably want to work with me. Yeah, it worked. Yeah, he wasn't interested. And I told him the project. I told him we are a lot like him, a lot like his band. I think he's really gonna dig our message. And he didn't dig it, and I didn't get it. And I'd have long conversations pleading with him to put out our record. And I'm surprised he still took my calls, but he took them. I got to hand it to him. He's very polite about it. But Kevin Seconds did like Ether Today, and that was very cool. Kevin Seconds was my man and totally took care of us. And Kevin, not only that, he took me to California for the first time, which was like a kid's dream come true. For New Yorker, we never left the tri-state area of Connecticut, New Jersey, and New York. And so Kevin, said, you guys should come over, and tour 7 Seconds for the whole West Coast tour. And we were just like, over spring break, because we were all in college. And we were like, oh my God, this is like a dream come true. So we were all very, very psyched. And the third week in or so, our drummer bailed. And he just didn't want to do it. I was like, what the hell? Why would... And I don't know. I just think there's like two types of people. The people that just like to tour and people who just like, they cannot function on tour. And it's not good or bad, but they just freak out. They miss their girlfriend. They miss their mom. They miss... Something happens, they just cannot tour. So this drummer just did not want to tour, even though it was with our favorite band. We're touring the whole West Coast. And so Kevin said, just come anyway. I'll find you a drummer. And Kevin decided he was going to drum for us, which was very cool. But unfortunately, he couldn't really play the drums that well. But he did. He did the whole tour for us, and we split the set with Troy from 7 Seconds. So they were our first drummers. And another funny story. Jordan was also on the tour with us, so that was cool. And I remember Kevin actually bought a car for us so we could tour in this car. It was sort of something like the Brady Bunch car. I don't know if you've ever seen that. Brady Bunch 1968 station wagon. And it had no plates or registration. And when you question Kevin on something like that, it was like, Kevin, do you have any plates for that? He just sort of like shifts his eyes around and goes, oh yeah, we'll find some plates for this thing. So he did this whole tour with an unregistered old station wagon, which never broke down. And I met so many, like my heroes. You met your heroes. I met like Pusshead and Mike Ness and Tim Yohannan and all these people. So I remember my first, the funny thing about Tim Yohannan, he was the guy from Maximum Rock and Roll. And he's dead now, but he liked Youth Today. Most of the people I met out there didn't like us, but Tim actually liked us. But he was obsessed with this whole moshing thing, because moshing, now it's like a household word. Like my mom probably knows what moshing is, moshing. But Tim was like, back then it was like it was a word they only used in New York, and it just sort of got public in the 80s. But it was for a long time New York hardcore word. Yeah. And I think to a lot of Californians, especially people like Tim, moshing meant like murdering because they were like the New York mosh, the mosh of New York. And it seemed super dangerous. And I overheard Tim in the kitchen saying to Kevin, this whole mosh thing, Kevin, you're getting mixed up in. I think you got to be a little careful with these guys. And the mosh thing is very bad. And then equally ridiculous as Kevin trying to defend moshing goes, oh no, Tim, the mosh isn't bad. The mosh is good. We know about I know the mosh. The mosh is a good thing, what they're doing. So then we had a nice one with Pusshead. Pusshead, the only thing that let me down about Pusshead was I was expecting him to look more like his art. And although he did somewhat, but... And then Pat Dubar was straight edge singer. I liked Pat Dubar a lot. From Uniform Choice. We liked Uniform Choice a lot. It was sort of like our competition, our West Coast competition. And unfortunately for us, the short New York mosh guys, Pat was straight edge, good looking, and tall, which we didn't have on our side. And then Social Distortion was great when we played with Social Distortion. It was like my first big show we ever played in Sacramento. And I got to meet Mike Ness, you know. And did you ever meet someone sort of famous? And what you should do when you meet someone famous is you should just go up to them and say, you know what? I really like you. I really respect what you've done. Thank you. And then just go away. I chose the dorkier path of trying to say something like, well, if I go up there like a fan, he's going to think I'm a dork. So I'm going to go up there and just like pretend like regular conversation stuff, you know, just go up there and talk. And I just went up to him. I go, Mike, what's up, man? Hey, how's it going? Hey, what type of microphone do you use? Like I even know a thing about microphones. And he just looked at me and goes, how the fuck do I know? I was like, all right, Mike, thank you. Goodbye. Right before we left, we got to play CBGBs, which was, for those who don't know, CBGBs, the most famous punk club in America. Talking Heads played there, Blondie played there, Richard Hell and the Voidoids played there, the Ramones played there. You know, what to speak of, like the Bad Brains, the Beastie Boys, Agnostic Front. So for me to play at a place like this was such like an inspiration. So if you've never been to CBGBs, you might think, well, this is a famous place. This must be some first-class facility. And I will say on a side note that whenever I'm in a bathroom, I don't like when the door hinge doesn't lock. You know what I mean? I never quite feel comfortable. But you never had to worry about that at CBGB's because there was no stall. There was no stall. There was no toilet seat. There was no toilet paper. As a matter of fact, the only thing that quite made it into a bathroom was a toilet jutting out of the wall. It did, and what's worse is there was no door on the bathroom. So, which means if you did have to take a crap at CB's, the stairs coming downstairs ended right at the bathroom. That means anyone coming downstairs can see you, or even if it's more awkward, you have to see people coming down the stairs. Like, and then that gaze when your eyes lock and you're sort of the most awkward moment. The thing about New York, we quickly migrated to New York. It was a move to get out of Connecticut to play sort of like hardball with the real New York scene, which is Connecticut was sort of like the B-rate B movie, whereas like New York was like Star Wars. And I liked it because the New York hardcore scene, they were like, it wasn't like high school. When you go to a hardcore show in New York, it was always sort of like a Marvel comic book. You had in high school you have people like Lou, George, Jimmy, Tyler, but in the hardcore scene, everyone had like a suffix, like a part of their name, like Don Fury, Vinny Stigma, Louis Bloodclot, you know, who else we got? Ray Bees, you know, Navy Dave, Crazy Dave, Dave Ratcage. Everyone had a nutty name, and they were equally as nuts, just like superheroes. And they had like some superheroes have like certain weapons they carry. Like it was the same in the hardcore scene. Some were unbeatable. Some could only be beaten by certain weapons. And it had a twist of violence also, the hardcore scene. Just like, you know how like in high school, in, you know, my suburban high school, there was always like one bully. Just one like psycho bully who would, you know, pick on you. So the New York hardcore scene, if you could gather every bully in America and put them into a nutty little community of insanity, this is like sort of like the hardcore scene, then there was always violence that was, it wasn't like typical violence in high school either. It was always much more dynamic violence. Like typical violence in high school was sort of like the kid punches you in the stomach, he throws you against the lockers, and then the fight's over, you know, or he gets you in a headlock, and then you pull his hair, and sort of like it rolls around, the principal breaks you up. In the New York hardcore scene, it was like you get hit with a garbage can lid, you know, it's like the Wild West, bottles breaking over heads. Like I've never saw so many bottles break except for those years. I would never think of hitting in real life a human with a bottle until I went to these shows. What other were weapons of choice? Chair legs were always big, and I don't know where all these chairs came from, but everyone always had a chair leg with some like either the top part of a nail, something sticking out of it, some type of primitive weapon, a brick, and then there was the 8-ball and a sock, which was the one of the more notorious weapons, which was like a medieval ball and chain where you just swing over your head. And I think the worst approach to violence ever was not really the beating, but the mugging of your boots. That was a real classic one for a while, where they just get mugged for your boots. And as far as I'm concerned, it's like, take my car keys, take my credit cards, here's my bank account information, but don't leave me on St. Mark's Place in my socks. So me and Purcell had this plan we were both going to quit school. I was a math major. Why I was a math major, I do not know. It was just like one of those things. You're like, okay, done with high school. Now what do we got to do? Go to college? Okay, what do you want to major in? I don't know. Math? How can I be miserable? So I dropped out of school after that Youth of Today tour in California. And Purcell was like, I'm going to drop out. I just got to finish this one semester. Then in the fall, we'll book a tour. We'll tour around America. And that was their plan. So I was like, all right, dude, so great. So it's summertime now. Purcell, we had a deal. I was going to work as a telemarketer in New York. Yeah, it's funny. And I'm going to save money. I'm going to buy a van. Purcell is going to work all summer at his, he was living with his father. Purcell was going to save his money and buy a Marshall half stack and a Les Paul guitar. We meet, and then he's going to move in with me, and then we're going to go on tour in the fall. So his father has no clue. His father thinks, what a good son I have. He's working so hard. He's trying to pay me back for all the money I'm putting out for college. So I'd call Purcell and be like, hey, so did you tell your dad you're not going to go to college in the fall? He goes, I didn't quite tell him yet. I'm working on it. I'm just I don't want to just I tell him all at once. I don't know if he's going to be ready for it. So another couple weeks would pass. I'm like, dude, what's up? Did you tell your dad you're not going back in the fall? He's like, I didn't really quite tell him yet. I don't think he's ready because he's really talking about college and getting really geared up on it. I was like, well, you better do it now because there's still a chance he can get the money back for tuition, because after a while they start keeping the tuition if you do it too late. And he's like, yeah, I know. I got to tell him. It's like a week before college. I was like, Purcell, what's going on? Are we going on tour or are you going to college? Just be straight up with me. And he goes, oh, dude, I'm going on tour. I was like, but you haven't told your dad. He goes, no, I haven't told him. We waited. The father lost all the tuition. He waited to the day before we were about to go on tour. It happened to be the coincidence because the day we were leaving for tour was the same day college started. So his dad is gearing up to drive him upstate to college. And he's like, okay, this is the day. I got to tell him. So he just goes, Dad, I know you think you're proud of me now because I saved all this money, and you think I'm going to put it towards tuition, but last night I just bought a guitar and a half stack. And the father's just sitting there reading the paper, and the glasses are down like that. And he goes, and I know that, you'd like me to go to college tomorrow, and you expect me to go to college, but I'm actually going on tour tomorrow. I have a whole tour booked around America. We're going on tour. His father just sort of sucked it in. He goes, and I know after the tour, and you think I'm going to be living here, but I'm moving in with Ray. He's got an apartment in New York, and we're going to move in and live together and just do the band full time. His father I don't know if you guys have Italian fathers, but there's 3 reactions usually: the violently wrecking shit, cursing and screaming, sometimes merging to a beating, and the worst of them all is when they just shut up and just go. They don't say anything, and that's even more scary because it's something's cooking, or they give that feeling of wait, he could explode, or he could just lay this incredible silent guilt on me. And that's exactly what happened. He just goes, I really thought you were going to make something of yourself, Purcell. He didn't call him John. John, I really thought you were going to make something of yourself. I really had high hopes for you. But instead, he's just choosing to be a loser. He goes, you're going to choose to be a loser and move in with Cappo, that drifter. I was like, quick, I'm 19 years old. What qualifies me to be a drifter? Anyway, Purcell was out. That's all it took. And on my part, I did my part. Purcell did his part. He got out. Father lost a little tuition money, but Purcell had the guitar and the guitar amp. And on my part, I'd raised $700 to buy a van. Now, I don't know if you remember when you're 19 what $700 is like, but it seems like 700 million bucks back then. It's like $700. I'm gonna get such a great van with this. It's like your first time you ever had $700 like in one like little pouch. You know, no one used banks back then. It was like you kept in like a jar or something. So I was like, oh God, yeah, Purcell. So I bought this 1974 Dodge cargo van, and if you're familiar with cargo vans, they're for carrying cargo. So when you start shoving like 10 humans in them, it's like being like in one of those slave ships where you come over, they came over, brought the slaves. It's like you're packed in this thing. There's no air, there's no light, and you pull over to a gas station, and it's like, light! It's one of those like intense experiences. And nobody, and I was like the oldest, like I knew nothing. You know, it's like, there must have been some like introduction to man class that I never took or was absent, because all the manly things in this world I cannot do. Like I don't know how to like install a floor, fix electrical fixtures, or change the oil. I didn't even know you had to change the oil. I just thought, why you have to change the oil and the gas? It was like this whole like, and I'm one of those guys. It's like, you know, you get a flat tire, you go to bring it in to get it changed, and the guy's like, okay, you got a flat, you got to get up 4 new tires. Like, what do you mean? I got 1 tire, I got to get 4 new tires? And they're just like talking circles around me. They're like, yeah, you got to get 4. You can't just get 1 tire. You got to get all 4 tires. I was like, well, I just have 1 flat. I got to get 4 tires. And he's like, yeah, you can't. You're going to get 1 new one. They're all just going to wear out unevenly. You got to get all 4 at once. All right, how much is that? And you got to get it aligned. It's like, well, what happens if I don't get it aligned? He goes, they're all wear unevenly. And it's just like, all right, 4 tires or 1 flat. And so I'm like the sucker of any guy who can, and I don't know. Like, it seems like most guys know all this stuff. I see them sanding cars down. I was like, what are they doing when they're sanding the car? So anyway, I was exactly like that, and I knew the most of the cars. And this van, we had a dream, because we practically never left New York, really, except for that California thing. So we had a dream, like, we are going to just drive. Our first show was in Virginia Beach. We're going to just drive this beautiful, expensive van down to Virginia Beach. We're just going to find a place to stay, and we're going to just jump in the ocean. That was our dream. We had like this romantic dream of just like jumping in the ocean in Virginia Beach. So it was pretty good. We piled in this van, we took off, and in Virginia, it just started making these smoke signals coming out of the hood, and we were just like, oh man, what is this? And so there's always like 1 or 2 guys in the van that like think they know something, like, it's the radiator, check the radiator, it's the smoke from the radiator. And then I'm like checking the radiator and like, never open the radiator, never ever open the radiator. So I'm like, okay, don't open the radiator. It needs water, it needs antifreeze. And finally, we all came to the group consensus that, let's just go a little slower. Maybe it'll fix itself. That was like our, and so we did it. We sort of like went slow. It was smoking. I think we poured some water in it somewhere. And we made it to Virginia Beach, and it was like the coolest thing. We actually did it really slow. And made it to the beach, jumped in the water at sunset, met some punk kid who happened to be a mechanic and happened to have like this punk house. There's always like one punk house in the town. We called it the Skull House, and it was just like spray paint all over the house. And yeah, you can stay here. Everybody stays here. Toilet doesn't work, and so these guys are working in the van. And they like took us in their Skullmobile to our next 2 shows. They had the Skull House, the Skull Crew, and the Skullmobile. And they took us to the next 2 shows, while the other roommate was also a mechanic. They're all working on the, Yeah, you didn't change the oil. I was, So now we're ready to go back up north. We played a couple shows down south, hung out with the Skull crew. Get in the car, and all of a sudden, it just starts violently shaking. After they had fixed it, it just starts violently shaking. The whole thing, like chitty, 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 bang, bang, like that. And all of a sudden, a final burst of smoke. We call the Skull crew. They come back. You broke your engine block. You cracked your engine block. And it was just like one of these things. Like, why didn't you, So, all right, we broke the engine block. Now we have a show. Now 7 Seconds is joining the tour. That was the headlining shows, these little crappy shows. Now 7 Seconds is joining the tour. We're doing the rest of the tour of North America, Canada with 7 Seconds. We were so psyched. All we had to do was get a new drummer because our drummer had quit in North Carolina. He was too depressed. And so we called up the guy from Bold to play drums, and he was going to meet us in New Jersey. Then, unfortunately, we had no van. We also had only $300, pooled together because we got $200. I think I had $100 left over. So we had to leave by midnight to make this show. It was now about 4 o'clock. So I figure I got about 4 hours of daylight to find and buy a $300 van. And I did. I found a 1970 Dodge van. Talked the guy down from $350 to $300. It was one of those white, like surfer vans. You sort of like drive on it, like sitting over the front wheels, flat front. The engine's like right on your side. You have to like open the thing, put your hand over the butterfly flap, and flames shoot out. Had no locks on the doors. It had like closet latches, like these little latches on the doors, and one of those slipping, sliding latches. But it was cool. It was exactly cool. And they said, look, Ray, you go to bed. Wake up around midnight. We'll get you on the road. We don't have time to register this or get new plates on it. We'll just do the switcheroo with the old van. And I was like, cool, I'll get to bed. So I wake up. They had sort of fixed the latches so they lock a little better, and they sort of tuned it up for us, and we are on the road. Everyone's piled in. Everyone's crashed, and there's such a feeling of freedom. I don't know, your first road trip when you're young. It's such a feeling of freedom being on the road. Now, I don't know if you've ever driven one of these any old car, actually. New cars handle really well. Brakes work really well, and the steering wheels work really well. This thing, it was sort of like driving a ship, like a sailboat. You have to tack back and forth, and you got to go like the steering wheel's like a little to the left, little to the right, little to the right, just to get it to go straight. It was like left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. And I did get it after a while, but initially it was like left, whoa, right, whoa, and so it's 1 o'clock in the morning now. Everyone's asleep in the van. I'm driving, feeling that freedom bliss. Immediately get pulled over by a state trooper. Immediately. And one of those like serious Virginia state trooper guys. And out of the car, everybody out. Like, what the hell? It looked like one of those clown cars at the circus, Like everyone's like 15, 16, 17 pouring out of this van. And I was like, what's the matter, officer? Because I'm not a good liar. Actually, wait a second. Take that back. I'm actually a very good liar. I'm a great liar, and I'm a lousy thief. That's what I'm not a good thief. I'm a great liar, but I'm a lousy thief. That's what it was. So anyway, I am a good liar, but sometimes it's I have like this spinning wheel of lies, like the wheel of fortune goes around in my head, like what will I tell this cop? I'm totally unregistered in this van, so I'm thinking, should I just tell him that we just registered it? Officer, I just registered it 10 minutes ago, and it's probably not up in the computer yet, so you want to even run the plates. It should pop up soon, though, because we did this like 10 minutes ago. I just bought this van 10 minutes ago. So he asked me straight on, he goes, who owns this van? I'm like, I do. You own this van? Okay, I'm going to run the plates. I was like, okay, fine. Spinning wheels. Where is it going to land? Better than me lying, though, is what I do naturally, is just play ridiculously stupid. That's always like my winning formula. And he just comes back here, and now he's freaking pissed because he knows this van has not got anything to do with the plates. And he just looks at me and goes, I'm going to ask you one more time. Whose van is this? Who do these plates belong to? And where are you going? And I go, officer, I told you the first time. This is my van, and these are my plates. He said, you're lying to me, boy. You are lying to me. I just ran these plates. These belong to a 1974 blue Dodge van. I said, oh, I know. That's my old van. And he goes, and this is not registered? He goes, oh, the plates are registered. I got insurance and plates. And he just goes, for this van? And I go, well, it's for both vans. It's just like, you know, I just got, that van broke down. I just got a new van, and I just switched them. Can't you do that? And he's just like, you can't do that. You can't just switch the plates. I go, well, how are we supposed to exist in this world? What happens when you break cars? Isn't there some type of grace period when you can just switch them? A grace window that's okay? He's like, what are you talking about? There's no grace period. You're gonna have to go home. I was like, no, we can't go home right now. I mean, our home is up in New York. We got to go. We're on tour, officer. I got Matt. Matt Bold was with us. If you ever saw Matt Bold, then he was really thin and scrawny. He looked like sort of like right out of Oliver Twist, you know? I was like, look at Matt. We got to get Matt home. And he was like, you don't understand. I could take you all to prison. This is unregistered. You have no seats in this car. I was like, officer, we have no money. Please let us go. And he goes, okay, just go. And then anyway, we ended up, Youth Today started going to Europe. And I got back. I lived in the ashram for a little while. And, but I never went to Europe. And they asked me, so here I am, sort of still like the Krishna monk guy, but we also got to go to Europe and playing some shows in America. So I was like, I always wanted to go to Europe. Let's just go to Europe. And I was totally intolerable. Like, no one in the band could take me at this point, and I couldn't take it. I was really tough to be with. And Jordan came with us on that tour, too. It was fun meets insane tour. They just like totally worked us, tried to get as many shows as possible, paying us the least amount of money. But we were sort of like the first band from our caliber. I mean, bigger bands like the Dead Kennedys have played in Europe, but no one other like our caliber sort of toured Europe. So it was really sort of trailblazing. So we just played some like real disgusting squats, and there were places we wouldn't even enter. They were just like urinating on the floor. It was just like horrible. But they booked this whole tour all the way around Europe. And the one highlight I thought was the Belgium show, because Belgium had like this straight edge scene where no one else really had a straight edge scene. So we played this very big show, and there are tons of straight edge kids and just a bunch of metal kids too. And the metal kids hated our guts. Now, during the whole show, someone was repeatedly whipping beers at me. Like, nonstop. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I never pick up, like, a LA Weekly, look for bands I don't like, and say, well, I don't like this band, but I wouldn't mind going down there and just throwing shit at them. It could be good, you know. You want to call up your friends. You want to go down and just throw shit at the band? If I don't like a band, I just don't go. So I went down, so constantly I'm getting beers. Like, they're not actually quite hitting me yet. They're just like hovering by, hitting into the drums, swinging around my, you know. And finally, I just look, whoever's throwing the freaking beers, it's not cool. Stop throwing if you don't like us, go. There's a bar in the back, go in the bar. But don't just stay there and throw beers at us. As soon as I said it, a beer just like, badonk. It wasn't a bottle, it was like a cup, but I was just like humiliated, covered in beer. So I was like, but I saw who did it. So I was like, I figured I got to confront this guy, you know what I mean? And something about being a New Yorker, you had no fear. Because if you could hang with all the, you know, Harley Flanagans, Vinny Stigmas, you know, all these like intense New Yorkers, then, you know, you're not worried in Belgium or Amsterdam, Holland. You just know you feel like fearless. You feel like a superhero. So I go in the crowd. Now, little do people know that I'm actually really short because on the cover of those records, I look really big, like the Statue of Liberty or something pointing. But as soon as I got on the floor, I realized this guy is huge. But I felt like I should say something to him. So I was like, and he somehow he must have had like, it was like a Gatling gun of beers because he had 2 more in his hands. I was like, where'd he get these beers from? And I was like, dude, what is your problem? Why are you throwing beers? And he just gives his beers to a friend, cocks his arm back and goes to punch me. And I sort of like duck. And then all the like straight edge kids tackle him, drag him away. And so that was sort of it. And he got dragged away. I never saw him. And the show was great. So after the show, we're saying thanks, goodbyes. And I go into the bar and get some, which is like a separate room, and to get some orange juice. And you know how like animals have those sensors in their head, like the gazelle knows when the lion's coming. It's like the head turns around like warning, or like the robot on Lost in Space is like warning, Will Robinson. That was my sensor when I walked into that bar. It was like danger, danger, get out quick, danger, danger, danger. I looked around and like everybody's a metalhead. And they're all looking right at me, and they just surround me. And the guy that threw the beer that I got in his face, he just had he had another beer. He's like a magician. The beer magician. He grabs this beer and just goes, "Hey, straight edge, have a drink." And he pours it right over my head. And before I could do anything, like 3 people just punched me in the face. And then, I don't know, like sort of whenever we go to a gas station, I've been practicing like a little kick, like a I don't know why. Maybe it was partly exercise, partly because I thought I was some like karate guy. And so I was just practicing kicking. So I'm going to kick this bitch right in the throat. So I just went, yeah! And I kicked him right at his throat. But unfortunately, there was beer all over the ground. I went, yeah! And landed right on my back, surrounded by these big Dutch Belgium metalheads. And so the best thing I could do was bullshit my way out of there. So I get up and I put my hands over my head like this and I go, "Who wants to be the first to die?" And because I spoke with such authority, I somehow scared them. And I sort of like weaseled my way out of that door and sort of like backed out and then sort of like took off in the club. And in the meantime, a riot just ensues. A whole place turns into a riot. I don't know where you were for that riot, but it was like noses were breaking, things were being thrown. So our tour managers fortunately had a second show booked for us that night. So that was like the first show. So we jump in the van. Things are getting thrown at the van. We drive away and we go to Den Bosch, which is this place, it's like sort of their version of CBGB. It's called the Wilhelm II, and we play this club. And this was like the early days of Youth of Today, so some people didn't even know us. All they knew us from was the Can't Close My Eyes poster. It was the tour poster, which I'm screaming into a microphone with a shaven head. So guess who's at the show? About 80 Nazis, skinheads, and their brides and their girlfriends. It was like a Nazi fiasco. It was like a KKK rally or something. And I was the hired entertainment, you know? And I was like, Purcell just comes out. And no one else, just Nazis. It wasn't like there was a couple Nazis in the crowd. It was all Nazis. And I was like, and Purcell just looks at me and goes, we were just like just made it out by the skin of our teeth out of a riot. And Purcell just comes in and he goes, you're not going to believe what's in there, but you might as well just go take a look. So we walked into the stage. I was like, oh my God, Nazis. How are we going to deal with this one? And I just go to the tour promoter. I was like, dude, we are not playing for Nazis. He's like, you must play. It's in the contract. You must play. You don't pay. You don't play. We do not get paid. You must play the show. I was like, dude, I feel like I'm like the court jester for Adolf Hitler. You know, entertain the Nazis while we drink and party. And I was like, dude, do I have to play for these Nazis? And he's like, you must play for the Nazis. He was like, this is part of the show. And so I had to play for these freaking Nazis. And they liked us. It was sort of a good show. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I couldn't figure this one out. But one Nazi girl, I don't know if you remember this, but one Nazi girl was madly in love with me. And she was hot. And so I'm going through this whole thing in my head. Okay, she's hot, but she's a Nazi. She wants you, but she's a Nazi. I don't know if ever you've been in that dilemma before. I didn't get down with her. I waved goodbye. Europe was definitely colorful in this insane tour manager who was American tour manager who was his famous line of the whole tour was getting pulled, like didn't have working papers. I don't even think you need working papers, but he was so paranoid. He got pulled over by the cops, and he'd just be like, "Shut up, everybody! I'm doing all the talking." He's like from Rhode Island. He's got this hard Rhode Island accent. He goes, "I'm doing all the talking." I was like, "Dude, just tell him we're in a band. I mean, we got equipment, we got drums. You can see all our equipment. Just tell him we're in a band, and we're just traveling around." And he's like, I'll do the talking here." The cop goes, "What are you doing?" And he goes, He's trying to speak in like in German accent. He's like, "We are a soccer team." And we were just like, "Oh, dude." So anyway, yeah, that was Europe.
Wasn't there some show where...
Yeah, that was a good one too. Vienna. They made a live record from that show. It was actually completely bizarre. They called it Anarchy in Vienna. It was such a weird show. It was just filled with strange, junky, homeless, transsexual people in the crowd. So we realized it was going to be a nutty show. So we just started doing, we did like all cover songs the whole show, including Anarchy in Vienna, which is why the live album's called that. But there was a strange she-male, sort of a half male, half woman. I'm still half male, half woman. Yeah. Yeah, and she was young. And I just went up to her and said, "You see that bass player over there, Walter? Really thinks you're cute." And then she literally chased Walter around the club for an hour. And Walter was so scared. And then there was a gay skinhead. Like, totally, like, he was sitting in the front of the stage. Like, you know how there's always, like, one skinhead guy sitting in the front of the stage so you don't really notice? And he started rubbing Purcell's leg. Like, during the whole show, like, Purcell's like, "What is it?" He's like, maybe it's nice to have a, he thought it was, like, maybe skinhead camaraderie. We had our head shaved, and we're like, but he was, like, rubbing Purcell's leg. And it really sort of, like, it started feeling uncomfortable. And then we went out to the van later. Me and Purcell were out there, and I saw the skinhead come out there. And I was like, well, why not try it twice? I go, "Hey, I think our guitar player likes you, dude." To the skinhead. And he goes, "Really?" I go, "Yeah, he's right over there. Why don't you go talk to him?" He goes up to Purcell, pulls out a switchblade, opens the switchblade, and he goes, "I like your show. I'd like to fuck you." And Purcell just goes, "Okay, yeah, well, we got." I think the conversation just ended there. But it was sort of like a terrifying show on like every account. It's a weird tradition in Germany that they throw confetti at the bands. It's a stupid tradition, especially if you're in a band, because then it's like confetti is everywhere, and you're like, "Wah!" Falling, and that's exactly what happened to Purcell. Like, it was like one of the first shows. Purcell slips, breaks his leg on stage. Played the whole tour like this with his leg in a cast. It sucked. That was Berlin, I think. They still throw confetti too. I'm still not into it. Never before had two scenes been closely interlinked than the New York hardcore scene and, you might think, the metal scene. The speed metal scene, the hip-hop scene, but those wouldn't make for good stories. It was the New York hardcore scene and the New York City transvestite scene. This is true, because right across from the premier hardcore club, A7, on the corner of Avenue A and 7th Street, is the Pyramid Club, which is a drag queen club. And for some reason or other, all the hardcore guys worked there. Jimmy Gestapo, Ray Bees, Todd Youth, Tito from Warzone. I worked there for a little bit. It was like a drag queen club. Now, I'm from Connecticut. Okay, our drag queen population is very low. We've never seen any drag queens in high school. So even then, I do exactly what you're not supposed to do when you see a drag queen. I'm sort of like fascinated and scared at the same time, and I can't like move my eyes. I'm like looking at them and I can't stop looking. And so one day, so I got caught in the stare by this one. I think she was called Boo. And she would wear all like white, pasty white makeup and a really tattered wedding dress. I'm scared. And this was like a full-on transvestite bar. And it was like they do like dancing on the bar, you know, cabaret shows. And then there was a bunch of like gays and hardcore kids and New York NYU students. And it was just a really weird time. And so Boo was looking right at me, caught me staring right at her pseudo breasts, you know. And I was just like, and instead of like acting weird, she had a cigarette, holding like an unlit cigarette, and she just goes, with a southern drawl, I don't know if it was part of the act or not, but she goes, "Are you staring at something, my friend?" And I just couldn't speak. And then and she goes, "Do you have a light? Will you care to give me a light?" And I did one of those famous Freudian slips where instead of saying what you're supposed to say, you say what you're thinking. And I go, "I'm sorry, madam, I have no tits." So me and Ray Bees decided that this club would be a great place to do punk shows. So we talked to the owner, who is the chief drag queen, very cool guy, and he said, yeah, you can do them on Saturday afternoons. So the drag queens were generally not hanging around that much on Saturday afternoons, so we made it to a total hardcore club on Saturdays, and it was the perfect place for hardcore. It's like a little bit like CB's. It was after CBGB's had shut down, and they had the shutdown show, and they stopped doing hardcore shows for a while. So me and Ray B started putting on these shows, and it was like CB's but a little smaller, which made it a little more packed. And it had a backstage. This one had one of those spiral staircases from the basement, which was the dressing room, right to the stage. So you just like, sort of like a rock star, climb up the stage. Yeah, I'm on stage. And after the show, you go down the stairs. So I was experiencing what I call a double dandy. I don't know if you ever heard that expression before. It's like, boys, if you're not a boy in the room, if you wear boxer shorts, you know how they have a hole for your penis, and if you somehow move your leg sharply, the hole rips, and if it gets caught on your leg, and if you're a lazy guy and you have no girlfriend, or if you can't sew yourself, or you don't live with your mom or something, you just are like, I'll sew it some other day. So I'm wearing these boxers with an extra giant hole in my pants, you know, but whatever. They're serving the purpose as boxers for now. But what happened was I did some type of jump that totally ripped my outside of my pants. So now I've got a double dandy, okay? So I'm running around the stage, la la la, la, like a cow. And sure enough, I just get into one of my like punk rock poses where my foot's up like this and singing, and there's some girl, I wouldn't even have known this, except for some girl with a horrified look on her face, just going, "Oh my God," pointing, "Oh jeez." And I just look down and I just go, oh man. So I left 400 kids, 4 guys in the band, and ran down those backstage to 4 transvestites. And I never thought I'd ask this question, but I said, does anybody have any underwear I could wear? Okay, I got one more. I have to tell this practical joke because it was my best. I'm going to tell you my science. There's a difference between practical jokes and lies. Lying is when you never tell them the truth. Practical jokes is you get someone to believe something that's totally false, and then you tell them the truth. But the real joy is you made them believe something ridiculous. So, and the best way to get it, to really get them off guard, is to set it up a few days, a week, a month even in advance. And I had Purcell. Great. I had told him at one time that there was something up with my little brother. That's all. I left it at that. Something's up with my little brother. That's all. And so whatever. And I said nothing. So that was planted. Then one day we were about to go to a show, and we were skateboarding my driveway on a quarter pipe, and I started saying, and he was going to eat dinner over my house, and I go, hey, when you have dinner, don't mention anything about my brother's school. He goes to a special school. I just don't bring up, like he was gonna anyway, but I go, don't mention anything about my little brother's school. And he goes, why not? I go, just don't mention anything. So we're sitting there eating dinner, and sure enough, Purcell has to mention something like, hey, what's up with your school? And my parents didn't have any idea what he was talking about, but I kicked him really hard on the table, and he's like, something's up. So we had like a 45-minute drive to go to the show, and that had totally set him up for the practical joke, because now he's begging for a lie. He's like, all right, dude, what's up with your brother in his school? What's going on here? And then to really make it even more extreme, you refuse to tell him. Dude, I don't know. I can't tell you. I can't trust you. Dude, what do you mean? Of course you can trust me. I'm like your best friend. Of course you can trust me. I was like, dude, I don't tell anybody this shit, and I'm not really in the mood to talk about it right now. And at this point, he is begging you to tell him anything. And so I go, all right, look. And then you make them swear to secrecy. I was like, all right, I'm going to tell you, but this better not, no one knows this. This is our family secret. No one knows, and it better not leave this car. He goes, dude, I promise. And I go, my brother has powers. And he's like, what are you talking about? I was like, should I go on? He goes, yes, go on. I go, my brother, ever since he was a little kid, can predict the deaths of our pets. He's like, what are you talking about? Like he will walk in when he was a little kid, like 3 or 4 years old. He would walk in the room and say, the cat's going to die tomorrow. The cat's going to die. And he'd walk out, and it wasn't a coincidence, because the next day the cat would like maybe get hit by a car or something. And he did this repeatedly to our gerbils, to our hamsters, to our dog. And it was so scary. And my sister would cry. My father would beat him. And he's like, you're kidding. Is that true? And then we'd be like, dude, I knew I shouldn't have told you. I'm sorry for even mentioning this stuff. And then he goes, no, dude, I believe you. What's up? And then what's up with the school? And so then he's like, you just get them hooked. And the trick with lying is get them to believe something totally fantastic. And once they accept it, up the ante. And just make it crazier. And if they believe that, make it even more crazy. So eventually they are believing something. Like Martians have landed, you're a child of a Martian family, and anything. So he's like, all right, so what's up with your brother's school? I said, well, they sent him to this special school for people with powers in New York City. And he goes, you're kidding. And he goes, oh, my brother's nothing. There's people in there who can levitate, who can bend things with their minds. I was just thinking about this off the top of my head. I didn't know where this was going. And he goes, but now it's getting bad. Now it's getting bad because all these kids are grown up, and they're in a gang. And they're trying to reclaim all the kids from that class. And they're starting this gang of kids. Once he believed that he can predict the deaths of animals, then I said he can actually kill animals too with his mind. And he goes, no, that can't be true. I go, yeah. If he gets angry, he just focuses his mind, and like a bird will just drop from the sky. Like we were playing football once. He was a little kid. He'd get picked on, and this bird just dropped. And we knew what it was. We knew mathematically what it was. And then sometimes if you get a good lie going, the person that you're lying to comes up with more of a lie. Like he goes, could he ever kill a human with his powers? Like, and then I was like, that's a good idea. I looked at him, I go, only once. I go, but you can't tell anybody this story. This is murder. He goes, and it was such a scary ride. I was scared. He said, well, we were going on a camping trip, and we were up in the woods, and my little brother was really small, and there was this big bully who used to pick on my little brother. Constantly, we're sitting around a campfire, and he goes, hey, little pipsqueak, hey, little pipsqueak, pipsqueak. And my brother was getting angry and just going, and all of a sudden, the guy drops dead and falls face first into the fire. Now, no one thought my brother had killed him, but I knew. I knew it. They all just thought he had a brain aneurysm. It was a talk of the town. But I knew what happened. I knew my brother had these powers. And so anyway, now they're reclaiming my brother. They're starting a whole gang roaming the city with violent powers. And and by this time, he had got to the club. And I was like, okay, I got to bring this to an end. I have him reach so far. How am I going to end this one? So I go, Purcell, there was one time when he predicted the death of this human, and we tried to save him. Because when my brother was little, he was really innocent. Now these people he's getting mixed up with are very dangerous. But when he was little, he was innocent, and that's when I really felt for him. Now I'm sort of scared of my brother. He goes, but back, we were sitting at a pizza parlor, and there was a man at the cash register, and he was buying a pizza, paying for the pizza. And my little brother grabbed me by the leg and said, Ray, that man's going to die. And I said, you got to tell Dad. We're sitting with our father. And he was scared to tell Dad because every time he said something like this, Dad would beat him. Don't get sad, you guys. This is not a real story. Everyone's like, really? Poor child. He said every time he would tell us, I said, you got to tell Dad. If that guy's going to die, you got to tell Dad. We got to let this guy know. And so my little brother just looked up at my father and said, Father, that man buying the pizza is going to die. And my father got up from the table in the middle of the pizza place, slapped my brother so hard across the face and said, you do not know that. You cannot know that. And he goes, he is going to die. He is going to die. And he started bawling and bawling. And then the guy walked out of the place with a pizza in his hand, and I just grabbed my brother, and I go, you got to tell him. You got to grab that guy. You got to tell him. And so my little brother, he was only like 7 years old, ran out of the pizza place, ran after the guy who was getting in the bus, and grabbed the guy's leg and started pulling at his leg. Get it, Purcell? Just like I'm pulling your leg. And he goes, what do you mean? I go, I'm pulling your leg. And he goes, what do you mean? There was no bus? No, I'm pulling your leg. He goes, what, the guy in the pizza parlor didn't happen? And I was like, dude, I am totally pulling your leg. And he just goes, oh my God. That is how you tell a practical joke. Youth of Today was really simple. We thought of the name. We wanted the most generic name you could ever think of. Seriously, because so many bands were not hardcore anymore, and it was such a dead time for music, and everybody was doing this crossover metal. We were like, we were gonna make the ultimate hardcore band. Imagine if there was no hardcore at all. It's sort of cool to start like the only hardcore band around. That's what it was like. It was like a desert of hardcore. DRI, who was the best hardcore band, became a metal band. Agnostic Front put out that metal record, and it was like Chromax were sort of a metal band. It was just like SSD and DYS were cool, but they became metal bands. And it was just like, we're going to be like the only hardcore band around. So we just made, what's the most generic name you could think of? And we go, Youth Today. I actually wanted to start a straight edge movement. I wanted to start a straight edge band, and I wanted to tour around America and maybe Europe and put out a couple records. They weren't sort of like grandiose goals. And I think a lot of times, and that's what's sort of cool about hardcore, and as I'm doing this film, a lot of people are saying the same thing, that we never thought about like even being a professional musician. And I didn't even realize I was a professional musician until I was sort of like, you're in the airport and you're writing out occupation, and it's going, oh, I guess I'm a musician. You know, it's like I never thought of myself. I never wanted to be a musician. It's just something like I fell into and started doing. And I think back then, nowadays you sort of look like, God, he's the drummer. If we're gonna get big, we got to get a drummer like that. You know, he's the man on guitar. We want to get a record deal. You got to get a guitar player like that. No one sort of thought like that. I think it was sort of like, you know, what do you want to play? I'll play guitar. Okay, what do you want to play? I'll play drums. And you just sort of did things. And I think the same was with our ideology, because we were in, me and Purcell were both in Violent Children, which was sort of a silly punk band. And so then we wanted to do something real serious, you know, and we had a certain mood that we wanted to imbibe, you know, and we definitely knew what we wanted before we started doing it, and that sort of helped. I figured, like, you knew exactly your direction. We wanted to take the elements of Negative Approach, which we felt like was the hardest band, with the positive lyrics of like 7 seconds, and sort of and make that. We didn't really think of it spreading to other bands, but it did right away. But we didn't think it was going to be like that. Purcell was in some other band called the Young Republicans, and we stole like 4 of their records, 4 of their songs. Stab in the Back was a Young Republican song. Matter of fact, there's demos somewhere with different lyrics for those songs. Yeah. Stab in the Back was one. I think one of the first songs we wrote was Crucial Times and I Have Faith and Wake Up and Live. I will say on Can't Close My Eyes, we had no clue that a straight edge movement would like begin. You know what I mean? But I think at a certain point, then we realized we have some type of responsibility, and it actually is a movement. We're not like speaking to just throwing it out there. And then sure enough, the straight edge scene, which was very weird, and we got really criticized, was that it became a scene within a scene. Meaning, if the new Gorilla Biscuits record came out, or if any shitty record came out, but it had an X on it, kids would just come in and buy it. And people who owned record stores hated it for that, because they feel like, hey, there's another great hardcore band, if not better hardcore band, but they're not straight edge, and no one's buying the record. And so I was just like, well, sorry, that's what happened. And so in one sense, like me and Purcell and you, and like we grew up in that punk era where we were still sort of punks. But then the next generation, it wasn't punk anymore. It was just straight edge. They didn't listen to punk bands or, you know, anything. They just listened to straight edge bands. All the bands that were on Revelation, that's what they started listening to. So I think by that point, and when We're on This Alone came, we realized like there's a whole pack. I mean, there was like a pack. I don't like to romanticize the past, because sometimes I feel like, well, today is just as good as the past. But it was a really special time. There were so many bands, and it was just like a whole mini underground scene throughout the world. Like, we come out here, and you guys were here. There'd be like a whole huge scene of you guys, and you guys were like a club within a club. You know, you were just like a huge pack of kids that, you know, I've known you guys for 20 years, you know, and it's weird. And you still sort of know each other. And you still, you know, and it's like, when I go back and do these interviews for the film with these guys, it's like there's such a connection with me and, say, Matt from Bold, or such a connection with me and Walter, or such a connection that it's like not one day has passed. There's people I haven't spoken to, like my judge, I haven't spoken to him in such a long time. I feel like when I spoke to him on the phone a few months ago, it felt like not one day had passed, and that we just picked up right where we left off. And there was such a gang of people that we hung out with. And you realize that, like, who does that with their life? Who has that type of community? Thanks, everybody, for coming out.